If you subscribe to this channel, you might know I'm a big fan of USB power banks. They're incredibly useful to keep your devices running when you're out and about, and just generally a bit of a necessity given our reliance on our electronic devices of various descriptions. What I'm reviewing today is the ALLPOWERS R600. Now this is known as a portable power station, and in many ways you can pretty much imagine it as a large version of this. This USB power bank has a capacity of 73 watt hours or thereabouts. It's an Anker PowerCore 2100, but it's limited to an output of 25 watts. The R600 is a bit of a different beast. It has a capacity of 299 watt hours, which, might not seem that much more. However, its maximum output is actually 600 watts, or even peak output of up to 1200. Now, if you're just charging your mobile phone, that's a little bit overkill. But what this has is two full 240 volt outputs on it, among other things, which we'll go through in this video, showing you that actually, when it comes down to it, this is a little bit of a different proposition. So first off, let's cover the basics. How much does something like this cost? Well, usually it retails for around £300, give or take. It's currently an offer on it's a bit cheaper, and I've even got a discount code if you're quick in the next 2 weeks. I'll pop that in the description below for 20% off. But £300 still isn't that expensive versus how much these can cost. If you look at some of the Anker power stations or even Jackeries, they can cost multiple times this. So this is definitely a more wallet-friendly choice. But it still has the kind of output and indeed abilities that you'd expect from something a lot more expensive. As I've already mentioned, you've got the two 240 volt outputs. I think they're really important. If you buy this in other countries, I think they'd do the 120 volt for the US, etc. But the point is, this will power full appliances that you'd use a normal standard plug with. It's really handy. In addition to that, you have two USB-C ports down here, which will give you an output of up to 100 watts. Then you've got two USB-A ports. You've also got a DC output over here, and also a standard car cigarette lighter plug too. And this is where it gets really interesting, you actually have a solar input too, so you could charge this with solar panels. You've got a standard plug input to charge it from, and you've got a surge protector reset switch as well. And that's not everything. To top things off, you've got a wireless charger at the top. How handy is that? This will literally do everything you need it to. But where would you use it? It is heavy. It's 5.8 kilograms. It's not a light device. Well, it's kind of designed for times when you need access to power where you might not necessarily be near a plug. So think if you're camping, if you're at a festival, for instance, maybe you're taking a longer road trip. This will keep you running regardless of what you want to power. I mean, okay, there is a limit, right? This isn't going to run an oven. It'll run a microwave, probably, but it won't run an oven. That being said, pretty much anything else, this will run. To test it, I actually took it outside, so let's jump into that and have a look now. To show what it could do, I've connected up a spotlight and a panel light to both of the 240 volt outputs, and they're working perfectly. It's a pretty demanding setup. There's a couple hundred watts being drawn every now and then when I change the settings, but overall it settles down to around 100 watts, and these will last for over 2 hours in this current setup. Now, of course, if you are using this whilst camping or at a festival, you would have different energy requirements. Perhaps you'd use both of the USB-C ports, which output up to 100 watts, to charge your phone or your laptop or your iPad or other tablet. Perhaps you'd use the USB-A ports to charge other devices, or you have the wireless charging mat on top, plus the DC outputs and the car charger output too. You have a lot of choice with the R600, and that's what I like about it. But this is a great example of what you can do pretty much anywhere. And the fun thing, it's not heavy enough to really get in your way. You can carry this around quite happily. Now, I wouldn't want to take it on a 10-mile hike, but if you're just moving, a little while from a car park or wherever, this is perfectly portable. So anyway, let's head back into the studio. So as you can see, that's a pretty demanding situation outside. I had 2 of my studio lights running perfectly for it for over 2 hours. Fantastic. What else could you do with it? Well, how about running a projector? So as you can see, I've set up my Ray Photo projector, linked to that above. I've reviewed it in the past, but it's a 1080p projector. It's a proper mains power projector. It doesn't have a battery on board or anything. So in many ways, it's not terribly power efficient. But currently it's pulling around 100 watts, and the R600 will power it for around 2.5 hours at that output. It's pretty impressive, to be completely honest. I like the fact that, you know, the ALLPOWERS R600 is still completely silent. It does have a fan in it, but it doesn't spin up very often. Mostly when charging, and sometimes when you've got a high load coming off it, like close to 600 watts. So I'll cut in some audio now of what it sounds like. I haven't changed the audio settings from what it is like now. This will just be some audio from it charging. Let's give you an idea of how loud the fan can get. It's not the quietest, but to be frank, you don't need to have this next to you. You can plug in a cable, so you can have it a little further away, and to be fair, at a couple of meters away, you really don't notice it. So the fan's just spun up, and this is what it sounds like. As I said, if you're really close to it, it's not the quietest fan in the world. However, it usually doesn't stay on for too long, and most importantly, it only comes on when it needs to, and then will turn itself off. It does sound like this when it charges. It's not the quietest, but honestly, from a couple of meters away, you really don't notice it too much. It isn't super quiet, but it's not offensive. And if you're charging it, you can probably charge it somewhere where it's not too loud. And see, that's how long it stayed on. I literally got on into shot within 10 seconds of that starting up. So hopefully you'll agree it's not too taxing. So although that was the noise that you get from the fan, I've now plugged in a whole load more devices. We've got the projector plugged in, which is now starting up. I've got my laptop charging, mobile phone charging via USB-C, and if you see the RGB light in the background, it's actually my most powerful light. It's a 300 watt light. That is now also plugged into this as well. So if I just unplug this for a second, you'll notice we've lost the RGB switching in the background, switch it back on. That's a pretty hefty light, and we're only drawing just over 200 watts at the moment. So despite the fact that we have a lot of devices on, it'll run this for just over an hour, but that's a lot of devices. Like, you're normally not gonna have a projector hooked up to it. So, or indeed a studio light. So as you can see, there's a lot of flexibility here, a lot of devices working at the same time. You're using the USB outputs, you're using the main power outputs, and it just works. It's fantastic. Now let me switch off the projector because it's a bit loud and clear all these other devices, and we'll cover a bit more about this portable power station. So as you've seen, you can run a lot of devices in the R600. You can run them all at the same time, or you can just run a couple and really use this to charge them for a long period of time. You can also charge it via those solar panels, really cool. Something that ALLPOWERS also sells, as I mentioned. Maybe something I can try out in the future, it'd be quite interesting. But what do you get in the box? You get your little manual and your warranty card in here. You also get a standard kettle plug, as you'd expect, to charge this thing. We'll charge that up in a moment. And that's pretty much it. It's pretty much all you need. The last feature I haven't mentioned is you have a light, which, there you go. And that light will actually run for a number of days, just on the capacity it has in the background. And it is actually insanely bright. If you aim this at like a ceiling, it will really light up a room quite happily, or if you're out and about, it is one heck of a torch in terms of a torch that will never run out of charge as long as this is charged up. So that's quite neat as well. The build quality of this device is good. The materials they've used are standard hard plastics. It feels pretty durable. I like the fact that you have the LED display on the front, and the LED display really does give you all the information you could possibly need. You've got the current state of charge. At the moment I've got 67%. You've got the input and output wattage, and you've got the estimation of how long this will actually continue to work for before it runs out of charge. You can also see the Bluetooth status, because believe it or not, there is an app that goes along with this, so you can actually control it from your smartphone. Very handy if you want to make sure you don't discharge it by accident. There's two power buttons, so you can switch off the 240 volt output if you want, to make your life a little easier, just in case you want to make sure, use just USB-C and you don't want to waste the battery on something that you've got connected to 240 volt. And you can also switch off the the USB-C side separately as well. The handle on the top feels sturdy. It's sort of a injection molded plastic, so feels fine. Don't think it's going to break off too easily. And on the sides, you can see these cooling fins on either side as well. Very important to have those. Make sure you never put something on top of this and stop it from being able to be cooled, because that could potentially cause a problem. And given the fact that this has lots of lithium batteries in it, it's not something I'd necessarily recommend. So at the moment I've been really positive about this, and I really like it, and I think this is going to become incredibly useful for me, especially when I'm filming on location, so I'm very pleased that I've added it to my inventory. I do have some minor criticisms. One is the rubber covers for the actual 240 volt ports are a little bit too small. So if you actually plug a plug in, you will notice that part of the plug ends up sticking out because the edge of the rubber gets in the way, and there's not much you can do about it short of ripping them off, and you wouldn't want to do that because then you won't be able to provide sort of the weather sealing. It's not waterproof, but it is sort of resistant to a certain extent because it is designed for outdoors. So you just want to keep in mind that, you know, that's not the best, I assume, because US and even EU plugs are a lot smaller than UK ones. So perhaps they tweaked the design and it didn't quite work out. A bit of a shame, one of those things. I would have liked if there were some plugs over the USB-C ports. It's not a must, but it just would have been quite nice. And the flap on the side is a bit more difficult to use at times, so to get it open and closed and get it to stay shut. But you know, reopening again now is incredibly difficult. But I mean, if that's my only problem with this, I think we're doing all right. Now, as we come to an end, I just thought I'd cover off the last few bits. Now, I did forget, it does come with this carrying case as well, which includes your standard solar cable chargers. So these are actually, I think they're MC4 connectors, if I'm not wrong, which is a standard solar panel connector, so that's great, because this will charge, as I mentioned earlier, from solar panels, up to 300 watts, which means you can charge this in around an hour. And from the plug, which is currently plugged into now, you can charge this in around an hour or less. This will charge up to 400 watts. So that's fantastic. Now it is going to get fairly noisy. At the moment it is plugged in and charging, but the fans will ramp up and down as required. But that's fine. Now that brings me on to its final use case as an uninterruptible power supply. Now, they're also known as UPSs, and if you don't know what they are essentially batteries that sit between a device that you don't want to lose power in the event of a power cut and your plug. And in this case, you could have it plugged into the mains and then have a computer plugged into it, for instance, one that doesn't have a battery, so a desktop. And if the power were to fail, this would kick in and you'd be able to save your documents and shut down your computer before the power cuts or before it runs out from power from here, meaning that you can keep on going and not lose your work. That is quite handy, and it's a good use, but it does get quite loud when it's charging from time to time. And it won't do it all the time, but when you are using the mains power, it can make its fans can spin up, and then it gets a little bit too loud for my personal preference, unless, again, you have it in a different room. It can be used for that. It is a use case. Just something to keep in mind. May or may not work for you. So that's the R600 by ALLPOWERS. Cool little device. As I mentioned, if you want to take advantage of that discount code, it's live until the 15th of August. Equally, if not, I think even if you're watching this a year down the line, this is a cool device at a good price point, and given its performance and capabilities, I would certainly consider it. Thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions about the ALLPOWERS R600, pop in the comments section below. And if you haven't already subscribed, make sure you do. It really helps me out. Thank you very much for watching. I hope I see you again next time. Goodbye.